Chapter 4 An Abandoned Throne, Part 2. As is customary, this is the part of the story where I start to skip around and summarize for both our sakes. The story the twins had to tell, and the information that followed, were something I couldn't even begin to be prepared for. They stated that after the war with the Red Queen ended, and I returned home, Wonderland entered a short age of absolute peace. The White Queen ruled gently, gracefully, and most importantly, uncontested. Darkness had vanished from the land as the Queen of Light watched over her people. However, we all know that peace never lasts in a story like this, and quite recently it met its end. After 9 years, shadows returned to smother the light of the kingdom. The source of the evil, however, was something not even the White Queen saw coming. Her uncle, the King of Clubs, and her aunt, the Queen of Spades. Masters of an ancient and foul magic, they came to confront White and leave everything burning in their wake. This led to the brief and bloody battle that met me upon my return. White's men fought valiantly, but in the end, they didn't stand a chance and were massacred. Curiosity consumed me as the story unfolded. How could such an unfair battle take place? I asked in confusion, and then added, White's soldiers are some of the most lethal in the land. Yet, there seems to be no other casualties around. Did they not kill a single man? Hatter was the first to speak up, in a serious yet reserved tone. You assume they fought men. I was quick to question. Did they not? Hatter paused for a moment, rising again from his chair. Without looking me in the eye, he responded as if ashamed. Come with me. I have something to show you. The company around the table followed suit with Hatter, setting down their teacups and rising from their seats. Still puzzled, I took my place as the tail of the group's formation. We trudged over the bodies of the valiant deceased and made our way through the throne room. I took a moment to silently recount the empty throne and all those horrified expressions. Within a few strides, we were headed down the hallway to the courtyard. It seemed as if none of us wanted to say a word, but eventually the silence became too much to bear, and with too many of my questions being avoided, I blurted out to Hatter. These men were some of the bravest I've ever known. They feared no man. Hatter stopped in the entrance of the armory and scolded me. Exactly, Alan. They feared no men. He motioned for me to take the lead as we walked from the armory to the courtyard. Nothing about it seemed abnormal from the rest of the castle, just more crimson remains. It wasn't until I reached the balcony overlooking the field of red roses that I saw the true cause of all this devastation. No, this is impossible. It can't be, I gasped as I locked my eyes on a handful of rotting carcasses, Jabberwocky carcasses. As I stood there, shuddering at the sight of the great beast, Hatter confirmed this bizarre scene, saying, The Black Royalty don't fight using men, they fight using monsters. I struggled to find words to respond. It felt like the gravity of the situation before my eyes was crushing my chest. The only thing I was able to mutter was, Where is the Queen? This time, Dom answered, That's the problem, boyo. She's gone, Dee finished. Just then, the March Hare popped up between them and exclaimed before crying hysterically, Poof! Bye-bye. I quickly looked to Hatter for some clarification. He quickly added to the conversation. In an attempt to end the bloodshed, she gave herself up as their prisoner. She's with the Black Royalty now. I fired back. We have to save her. Hatter replied frantic. No, no, no. See, that's exactly what they want. They want a meeting with the famous savior of Wonderland. This news made me pause before turning to Hatter in irritation. You tried to lie to me. Why? In a nervous chuckle, he answered, Well, you see, the Black Royalty are nothing like the Red Queen. They are by far the most dangerous beings that you and even Alice have ever faced. They want war, Alan. Not just for the White Queen's throne, but for the entire existence of Wonderland. I barked back in response. And what would happen to Wonderland if we did nothing and let them claim it without a fight? I begged, marching to the armory. I'm going to this meeting of theirs. It's obvious we have much to discuss, and I refuse to keep them waiting a second longer. With a huff of disgust, Hatter led the rest of the group close behind me. Of course, I imagine you'll be going alone then, he asked. Naturally. They want me and me alone. Not obeying this could cause an unnecessary issue. Following me into the armory, Hatter responded, We are the Knights of the White Rose. I quickly hushed him. Exactly, Hatter. The Queen is going to need her men here, ready and waiting. I'll have a plan when I come back. I walked past him, back to the center of the courtyard. Standing amidst all the gray, I let out a loud whistle against a wind that echoed for miles. The entire group stood in silence as we waited to see what answered. In a short time, the roar of a massive beast called back to me, as if as a body took shape in the clouds. It was the Griffin, the one who trained me to use a sword. This time, he was going to carry me to meet the Black Royalty. He landed on the ground with another great roar and then bowed, saying, Hello, sire. I greeted him with a smile. Good to see you again, Griffin. As I climbed onto the beast's back, the March Hare handed something to Hatter, who yelled out, If you won't take us with you, would you at least take this? He held out the vorpal blade in front of him. No need, Hatter, I replied. This is a diplomatic meeting. If war is to begin, it won't be upon this invitation. With that, I gave Griffin the word. And we left Hatter and the others far below, and were on our way to meet the Black Royalty. Chapter 5. Aggressive Diplomacy. Griffin carried me high above the rest of the world. It seemed we were out of range of the chaos below. I found this time soaring through the mist to be oddly peaceful. Neither of us spoke for quite some time. That was until I broke the silence. Glad to see you survived the attack. Just one of the lucky ones, I suppose, the beast replied. If I may, sire, how did you know I'd be there when you called? I let out a small smile as I replied. I really didn't. I just believed. Griffin let out a roar of appreciation as I asked, So where might we find the Black Royalty? This Black Royalty. I led a scouting party a few days after the attack. and found they had taken over Red's old castle, Griffin said. Somehow, this news wasn't of any real surprise. It all seemed perfect. The castle that once isolated one evil from the world was now housing another. This thought was interrupted by Griffin saying, Sir, we're almost there. He flew lower as the land slowly crept back into view. And by the way of things, he was right. Nothing had really changed from the condition of White's castle. We were just following a trail of pure devastation. Ash covered the ground as far as the eye could see. Nothing was alive. It appeared as though the entire land had been destroyed and left in this apparent grave for centuries. The only change was in the air. The grey mist was slowly turning black, and the closer we got to the castle, the stench of death and decay grew stronger. Eventually, we saw it, a massive shadow covered by thick black clouds. The closer we got, the more it came into clearer view. Atop a desolate mountain stood Red's castle, or rather what remained of it. It was a shadow of its former self, eroded by the evil that now lived within. Darkness had eaten away at the walls, and death had claimed it. The red roses that once surrounded it were now all wilted, and only the thorns remained, leaving a pit of jagged spikes to impale unlucky souls. As Griffin and I flew toward the main door, a sudden uneasiness came over me. I couldn't help but feel as though we were being watched from the shadows, like we weren't the only thing in the air. With the surrounding area appearing unsafe, however, we landed close to the door. I was very slow to dismount Griffin, looking over my shoulder, trying to see if we were truly alone. My apologies, sire. I must go quickly. I don't think it's safe for me to linger here. I will be close by. Just whistle when your meeting has adjourned, said Griffin, his usual brave demeanor giving way to a weary one. Sharing the same feeling, I dismissed him for the time being, and in a flash he disappeared beyond the heavy clouds. Completely alone now, I stood in silence, listening to the wind for any signs of immediate danger. Not sensing any, I proceeded cautiously toward the weathered door and let myself in. Darkness was all that waited for me inside the castle. I stepped inside and was swallowed up by the pitch-black void that was the throne room. My steps echoed off the hollow walls as I came to what I could only imagine was the middle of the room. Just then, a rugged voice spoke out. "Do you know where you are?" I replied, trying to show a bit of confidence. "I'm in the presence of the Black Royalty." The voice asked, "And what purpose could you possibly have for willingly coming here?" I quickly responded, leaving little time for doubt. "They asked for me. I was told they wanted to have a discussion with me." The voice perked up. "So this is the mighty Alan of Wonderland." A sense of displeasure crept in as it went on. "Though for a man with a legend such as yours, I imagine you to be a bit older." Keeping a serious tone, I replied, "Well, I hope I don't disappoint you further, your majesty." The voice let out a pleased chuckle. "He's even got manners, this one," it said, as though speaking to someone with it. A little excitable now, it asked, "Tell me, lad, do you fear the dark?" I fired back, "Fear it, no, but it's good for one to be cautious in it." As I finished my answer, the room was suddenly illuminated. Flames shot up in torches along the walls as everything and everybody came into the light. The source of the voice in the dark became clear. It was the King of Clubs. sitting on the right throne. He had the characteristics you might typically find excuse me, you might typically find in a dwarf, minus the height issue. A round yet solid man, a thick black burly beard rested on his chin. Dressed in a long black robe, he was adorned in golden clubs in different places, nearly from head to toe. His crown had black spikes circling it, stemming from a golden club resting on the top. To his left sat his wife, the Queen of Spades. Much skinnier than her husband, she was a tall woman. Her long, wavy black hair came down the front of her shoulder and rested on her chest. She was dressed very elegantly, as a queen should be. Her robe, not much different than the king's, had a spade-shaped cowl that cradled the back of her head. She wore a black spiked tiara where a jeweled spade was housed in the center, or with a jeweled spade housed in the center. "A wise truth," the king answered, with a note of concern in his voice. He looked me over and continued, "But how does one so cautious not bring a weapon into the belly of a beast such as this?" Noticing his interest in my missing weapon, I answered, "Diplomacy does not need to be at sword tip. Take it as a measure of good faith that this meeting will end peacefully." Impressed now, the king replied, "Ah, you are every bit the king I heard you were." Shocked, I questioned, "King? I am no king." With a smile, the king hushed me. "Modesty. That bloodline of yours is why you're here. The people speak the name of Alice in tales that will surely span generations. Yours will too, in time, no doubt, but perhaps you are right. I am a king. You are just the hero." I barked back, "With all due respect, my lord, I don't think this is quite the time to be exchanging pleasantries." The king laughed at my boldness. "The young savior wishes to talk, and talk we shall." I intercepted him. "Why? Why did you massacre them?" The king scoffed. "Straight to the point, then. Nasty business as it was, I assure you it needed to be done. Means to an end." "What end might that be?" I asked, clenching my fist. "An absolute one," the king replied. Seeing my disgust, he added sternly, "You are here for a reason, and an important one at that. So I suggest you check your temper and listen." I released my fist, and the king took a breath and began. "Many years ago, my brother, the King of Diamonds, and his wife, the Queen of Hearts, had 2 daughters, Red being the oldest, of course, and next in line for the crown. Years went by, and their characters began to show. Red being ruthless and cruel, and White being loving and just. When the time came to pick a successor, White was picked rather than Red," I interrupted. "I know the history. My bloodline helped write it." "Diplomacy, Alan," the king scolded, before continuing in an aggravated tone. "My brother was a fool, too naive to see that neither daughter was suitable for his throne. Red was too full of hate, and White is too gentle to do what really needed to be done. Instead of handing his place over to me, a true king, he allowed for his girls to fight one another, which ultimately took a life. Wonderland blames Red for its turmoil, but it fails to cast an eye to its own king. So, what do you have to do with any of this?" I inquired aggressively. "Unfortunately, everything, young lord. the king answered. You see, my beautiful queen was not blessed with the ability to speak. She was, however, granted use of powerful magic, and with it came eventual domain over the Jabberwocky. So we bred them, trained them. To be an army, I muttered in shock. Confirming my statement, the king went on. And a strong one at that, much stronger than those silly card soldiers and chess pieces my nieces use. He saw the horror in my eyes and said, Don't be so surprised, Alan. Where do you think the Jabberwocky Alice fought came from? You, I whispered. He wasn't just any Jabberwocky. He was the best, the leader of the pack. The king added. You gave Red a Jabberwocky? I asked accusingly. Gave? The king asked, as if offended by such an accusation. Crafty as she was, she stole them right out from underneath our nose. You can imagine this put us in a rather unfavorable position within Red's crusade against her sister. How does this justify all the killing? I asked in a very concerned tone. We were held responsible for that war, the one in which Alice cemented her name in our histories. We are also responsible for making it right. But Red is gone now. Can't you let Wonderland be at peace? I pleaded. The king laughed at the notion. Peace? Red got what she deserved, I won't dispute that. But her death did and will not bring peace. Wonderland fails to see the throne in which my brother and his daughter have taken has become tainted with the blood of the royal family. We must correct this mistake at any cost. Afraid to know the answer, I asked. And what cost? And what is this cost? White's Wonderland. The king answered. It must be wiped from existence. Immediately hostile, I exclaimed. You brought me here to tell me you plan to slaughter innocent creatures? That would depend on your actions, Alan, the king corrected. The purpose for this meeting was to hopefully gain your cooperation. The people believe and trust in you, Alan. We hope that you can convince them to surrender to us so that we may work to rebuild Wonderland properly together. And if I refuse, I snapped. War. Our Jabberwockies will bury White's kingdom under a mile of ash and flame, the king warned. I stood in stunned silence at this ultimatum. The king once again got my attention, saying, The queen and I are aware this isn't an easy decision. We have something that might influence you. With a glance at his wife, the queen raised her hand lightly, and a door to the left of the thrones popped open. Unsure of what to expect, I looked back at the king. A measure of good faith, he assured, as he motioned, and I walked through the door. Chapter 6. A Wilting Rose. The door I walked through gave way to a dimly lit hallway. As the door closed behind me, I realized that this hallway was a dungeon of sorts. I looked around the room and saw a row of cells on both sides of me. They were dark, appearing to have nothing or no one in them. The cell at the end of the hallway was the one that really caught my attention, because it was the only one with lit torches outside it. This may have been what the Black Royalty wanted me to see. So, without much hesitation, I quietly crept toward the cell and peeked inside. This cell, much like the rest, was very dark and cold in nature. It was hard at first to make out that it was occupied, and after a few moments of searching the room, I saw her. Tucked away in the corner of the room was the delicate silhouette of the White Queen. Chained to the wall like a common peasant, her shape didn't seem to move. With a shiver of fear that White could be hurt or worse, I quickly grabbed a torch from outside her cell door. As I did, it conveniently popped open, allowing me access. As I got closer, more of White became visible. Much like her castle, she was now a shell of her former radiance. With a now gray complexion, a shredded dress, and a gash above her left eye, it was obvious that the darkness in this place had taken its toll on this beautiful creature. As I knelt close to her side, I spoke softly, "Your Majesty." At the sound of my voice, the Queen opened her tired eyes and smiled. She responded with nothing but a faint whisper. "Alan, my champion, is returned." "What have they done to you?" I asked. The Queen replied with a slight cough, "Punishment for my father's deeds." With regret in my voice, I pleaded, "I'm so sorry I let this happen. I wasn't here to protect you." The Queen gently silenced this remorse. "No, my child. This burden rests solely on the shoulders of my family. The fault is mine." Accepting my innocence in this, I changed the subject. "Wonderland is in grave danger. They intend to take your throne with or without your cooperation." "I know," said the Queen, before adding, "there seems to be no clear right or wrong answer. I am too weak for war, but we can't just lay down and die." I quickly interjected, "And we're running out of time to make that choice, Your Highness." "Time," said the Queen weakly. "Something I fear I don't have a lot left of. As the Black Royalty's dark magic takes further hold on the land, I fade more and more. If war was to come, I could not defeat them." "What would you have me do?" I asked. "Lead them," she replied. "Be my hero once again." "But how?" I questioned. "We don't have the force to hold them off." "Crystal Rose," the Queen whispered indirectly. "My Queen?" I asked, wanting her to reiterate. "Wonderhaven. You must find Wonderhaven," she replied. "Wonderhaven, Your Majesty?" I asked, puzzled. "An ancient place that has been guarded by my family for generations." The Queen continued, "Long ago, my father created a weapon of great strength using pure light magic. He called it the Crystal Rose. He said that it was only to be used when the kingdom needed it most. To keep it out of the wrong hands, he hid it in Wonderhaven. You must find Wonderhaven and retrieve the rose." "Where is it? How do I find it?" I asked urgently. Using her eyes to point, she glanced down at the white necklace around her neck, saying, "This will guide you to the key." I hesitated. I can't." "Take it, Alan," the Queen urged. As I reached up and broke it away from her neck, she verbally nudged me onward, saying, "Now go. Make the right decision." With that, I bowed my head in respect and gratitude and took off down the hallway back to the throne room. As I appeared again in front of the Black Royalty, I spoke out confidently. "Will you release her to me? Allow me to bring her back to her people, to help me convince them to make the proper choice." The King of Clubs let out a loud laugh. "Does the hero not have confidence in his abilities? If we wanted her to do it, we would have no use for you. Furthermore, releasing her means releasing the leverage we bring to the negotiation table. She stays here, but rest assured, you will see her again when you've made your choice. Away you go now." Not getting the answer I wanted, but rather the one I was expecting, I replied, "As you wish, Your Majesty," and began walking to the door. Just before I was about to disappear, the king stopped me. "Alan, diplomacy. Make the right choice." The words sank in for a moment before I closed the door behind me. I walked with a purpose now to the place where Griffin and I landed, just in front of the entrance. Looking up at the fog, I let out a piercing whistle that ricocheted through the air. After a few moments of silence, a massive figure came into view. With a roar of greeting, Griffin landed close to me. I quickly jumped on his back, and before I knew it, we were in the air, headed back through the darkness to White's castle. But back in the Black Royalty's throne room, the king and queen sat in silent thought. Eventually, with eyes cast to his wife, the king said, "He was with her for quite a long time. Perhaps we should find out what our dear niece and her champion shared." A menacing smile came across the queen's lips as she stood up and strode toward the dungeon hallway. And that's going to wrap up yet another episode for us, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.